As the courtroom filled with gasps, did I finally expose Karen's ruthless betrayal, or would her scheming silence bury me alive? It was an unforgiving August morning in Florida when I stood, trembling, in front of the foreclosure notice plastered on my door, the sun beating down like a spotlight on a stage. I was still reeling from the weight of my most recent struggle scraping together that final mortgage payment just last week. My hands felt clammy, as if every drip of sweat was a testament to the anxiety and stress that had become part of my daily routine. But now, with that notice glaring back at me, my heart sank, realizing the bank was ready to take everything. The ink on the paper was still barely dry when I spotted Karen, the real estate agent who had sold us this house, swaggering down the sidewalk like she owned the world. She wore a smug grin, the kind that shot daggers into my troubled mind. "Watch out, honey. The market is brutal," she chirped, waving the flimsy paper in her hand as if it were some kind of trophy. It was sickening to see her relish in my downfall, a betrayal that cut deeper than the harsh summer sun. I felt an involuntary anger bubbling beneath the surface, her words a haunting melody of mockery echoing in my ears. Didn't she know how much I had fought to keep this home? The house, a dilapidated but hopeful-looking fixer-upper, had been our dream and oasis, to nurture our family and restore our lives after my husband lost his job. For months, we had struggled to catch up on our mortgage, scrambling to juggle bills and convincing ourselves that making this final payment would free us from the shackles of our debt. I had meticulously documented every transaction, every late-night phone call, and each desperate plea for help. Now, that effort felt utterly futile. The bank had claimed our payment went unacknowledged. It sounded absurd, yet everyone I spoke to in their customer service had confirmed it. The frustration made my muscles tense as I recalled the monotonous hold music. The promises of resolving my issue soon intertwined with the haunting whispers of bureaucratic indifference. I had come to suspect that this was not just a coincidence after all. Financial institutions thrive on chaos. Their dismissal of our plight seemed planned, coldly calculated. This wasn't just about money. It was our home, our life, tossed away under the guise of a clerical error. The escalating panic as the foreclosure notice sank deeper into my consciousness sent me into a frenzy. I found myself surrounded by stacks of papers, receipts, and proof of my final payment hung on that flimsy thread of hope. I could almost hear the thumping of my heart against the walls of our small living room, almost drowning out the sounds of my kids playing in the other room. Each time I glanced at the door, my chest tightened, fearing I'd receive another unwelcome knock from a bank representative. Would I be forced to explain my failure to save our home to my children? In the whirlwind of emotions, I felt the familiar sting of betrayal, something I had thought I could escape. Everything we had put into this house, those endless hours of labor, the dreams we painted across each room, they felt so fragile. I glanced out the window, seeking solace in the lush greenery of our yard. But all I saw was Karen leaning against her car, chatting animatedly with a neighbor, as if her life were untouched by the relentless pursuit of money. Did she even remember the panic in my voice when I first called her to inquire about the house? Or the vulnerability when I placed my trust in her expertise, believing her to be our beacon of hope? She had sold us the dream I had thought she cared about our future. The past weeks had been a lesson in deception and manipulation, a part of the ugly reality of homeownership that was disguised by freshly painted walls and the inviting scent of new carpet. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Behind the facade of homeownership lay the predatory shady agents like her, callous bankers, and their merry dance of negligence. As I wrestled with despair, I returned to the notice on the door, contemplating my next move. I had proof, I had determination, and a flicker of hope still remained in my chest. I could not allow myself to buckle under the pressure of their greed and schemes. Somewhere beneath the tangled web of red tape, I would fight to clear my name and reclaim our home. My future depended on it. Little did I know, however, that the fight would plunge me deeper into an unknown web of financial deceit and betrayal, unraveling layers that I never dreamed existed, and that soon, Karen's role in my life would be anything but finished. As I stood there, my heart racing with both anxiety and resolve, I could sense that things were about to become much more complicated than I had ever imagined. Surrounded by the smell of mold and the sound of our cat scratching at the front door, I dove deep into the mountain of paperwork that had become my nemesis, determined to find proof that I had sent the payment. My shaking fingers scoured through the endless documents, desperate to trace every trail to claim my innocence in this disheartening saga. The sinking feeling in my stomach gnawed at me, urging me to remember every detail of that fateful transaction. The low hum of anxiety buzzed around me like the incessant Florida humidity, stifling and dirty, reflecting how trapped I truly felt in this unjust nightmare. My heart raced as I searched, knowing that a single clerical error could destroy everything I held dear. It was early evening, the golden light from the setting sun filtering through the window, casting long, shadowy fingers across our cluttered living room. My laptop lent me its glow, a flickering beacon in the darkening room as I hunched over the keyboard, searching frantically. I had barely slept since we received that foreclosure notice. My fingers danced across the keys as I combed through bank statements, email threads with customer service representatives, and any shred of evidence that I had fulfilled my obligation. Every minute spent in this hellish pursuit seemed to stretch on endlessly, each hour turning painful and surreal as I sank deeper into despair. I finally stumbled upon an ominous email from our mortgage servicer, its subject line stark and unforgiving, no record of payment. My blood ran cold as dread washed over me, clawing at my throat as panic seized control. How could they deny a transaction I had painstakingly documented? A desperate lump formed in my throat as waves of anger crashed through me. They held all the cards, and the prospect of losing our home felt ever more tangible. I imagined Karen's triumphant face, that smug grin plastered across her lips, relishing in my misfortune. This was not just about numbers, it was about survival, and I was losing ground. Days turned into a hellish blur, dominated by frustrating phone calls, all filled with insipid rhetoric from the bank's representatives, their empty promises echoing like a cruel taunt. Each interaction felt like grasping at smoke as I received the same canned response that they were escalating the issue and would provide updates shortly. Their mechanical responses made my skin crawl, reflecting a systematic apathy that seemed designed to wear me down, to deny my very existence in their colossal financial machinery. Each call was punctuated by the familiar hold music and agonizing symphony of corporate indifference. Yet, amidst my isolation, I found a flicker of defiance within. I started accumulating evidence, photographing every email, every lengthy thread of communication, building a fortress of proof brick by brick, all in an effort to protect what was ours. Late into the night, I became a detective in my own home, my relentless pursuit fueled by the need for justice, the desperate ambition of preserving our dream. I thought of the home and the memories that echoed within its walls, the laughter of my kids, the warmth of family dinners, our collective hopes woven together in every room. These thoughts propelled my resolve even further. One fateful afternoon, fate twisted its knife even deeper. I overheard a conversation that sent icy fingers of dread slicing through me. I was making my way to the local library, equipped with my laptop and boundless determination, when I found myself in line behind none other than Karen, who was engrossed in a phone call, discussing my case with unrestrained glee. "You've got to love a good foreclosure. They're just so easy to manipulate." She chortled into the phone, her laughter ringing in my ears like shattering glass. My breath hitched. The realization that she was not just a passive observer, but a perpetrator in this sinister game, left me reeling. As she hung up, her conversation unfolded like a sinister script, revealing an insidious connection between her and Mr. Thompson, the banker overseeing my case. They were not just acquaintances, but conspirators in this harrowing saga, their schemes intertwining around me, tightening like the noose of a predator, closing in on its prey. My heart pounded wildly as I envisioned the depths of their treachery, how they were not just robbing me of my home, but of my dignity, my future, and every shred of hope I had clung to since my husband lost his job. I had never felt so trapped, nor so acutely aware of how ruthlessly they exploited my vulnerability. Caught in a whirlwind of confusion and anger, I stepped back into my home, my sanctuary now feeling like a prison. My walls, once adorned with foolish dreams, began to echo the disillusionment pressing heavily on my heart. How had I fallen so easily into Karen's manipulative schemes? The last glimmers of trust I had felt in her melted away, replaced by an indignant fire burning deep within my core. With each step I took across the threshold, I vowed I would not let them tear apart the life I had worked so hard to build. As I pressed onward, the date of our inevitable court hearing loomed nearer. I felt a sense of clarity manifesting, forcing me to prepare myself for battle against this monstrous system. My heart knew I was not just fighting for myself, but for every homeowner facing the same fate. The mountains of paperwork were now battle-scarred lines of examples, a testament to the struggles we all faced, and I was determined not to let Karen's malice define my destiny. With renewed determination fueling my action, I reminded myself that I had poignantly uncovered more than I had initially thought. I now had a target. Little did I know, however, that the bank's game was far from over, and that lurking beyond the paperwork was a deep abyss of deception that would threaten not just my home, but the entire fabric of my life. I could almost hear the ticking clock counting down to our court date, signifying a moment when truths would be revealed, unmasking the wolves dressed in suits. An exhilarating dread coursed through me as I realized the next chapter of my story was about to unfold. And with it, a revelation I'd never anticipated could shake the ground beneath us. It was early evening. The golden rays of the setting sun stretched across our living room, scattering soft hues like memories of better times. I was buried under a mountain of paperwork, my heart pounding alongside the rhythmic tapping of my fingers on the keyboard. Days had morphed into a suffocating cycle of anxiety, each call to the bank draining me further, a constant reminder that I was battling a faceless oppressor. Each representative, a cog in the bank's merciless machine, spoke the same scripted phrases. "We're escalating the issue. Please hold." The robotic tones felt like a personal affront. They echoed in my mind, feeding the festering grievance that was slowly transforming me into a shadow of my former self. Despite the oppressive gloom of uncertainty, I found resilience. Night after night, I delved deeper, scouring through bank statements and emails, compiling each interaction into an ever-growing portfolio of evidence. My laptop's blue glow illuminated the darkened corners of despair, casting long shadows across the room as I persevered, building a fortress of truth around me. I thought about my family, the bonds forged inside these walls. As their laughter ricocheted in my mind, I had to save our home. I was not merely a victim, I was a fighter. Still, a flicker of doubt threatened my resolve. What if I couldn't find proof in time? Then, just when I thought I had broken through the chaos, the universe threw a chilling twist my way. One mundane afternoon, I happened to be inside a gnarled oak tree's shade at the library, scrolling through my notes when I spotted her. Karen, the very real estate agent who had slipped the chains around my neck, stood a few feet away on the phone giggling and holding court with the banker enforcing my foreclosure. My skin prickled as I inched closer. Her voice, dripping with malicious amusement, carried through the air like a taunting melody, illuminating the depths of her betrayal. "Yeah, it's going perfectly. That payment issue is such a great loophole. She'll never see it coming." Her excitement sent a shiver racing down my spine. I felt as if I had walked directly into a den of vipers. I couldn't breathe. I repressed a cry, positioning my phone like an invisible shield to record this revelation. This wasn't just a case of mismanaged payments. They were orchestrating my downfall, relishing in my pain. The depth of their malfeasance began to unfurl before me, revealing a conspiracy that went far beyond incompetence. As I shortened the distance between us, I concentrated, fighting against the nauseating tide of how inept I had made myself seem. The casual friendship I had thought I built with Karen was merely a web, spun to entrap me in her deceit. I had been so blind to her insincerity, my heartbeat quickened, a chant of righteousness surging through me. This was my moment to gather momentum against those who sought to push me out of my home. The fear gnawing at my core was nothing compared to the rage that ignited within Methus was war. I returned home trembling, dragging my feet as I pondered my response to the sinister conversations I had just overheard. Our home had become a museum for my dreams, each room echoing with laughter, the laughter of my children, the warmth shared over meals, and the silent prayers of hope. Now it felt haunted by specters of betrayal. The living room, once vibrant, darkened under the weight of this revelation, imprinting a solemn realization the world was not going to play by my rules. It was time I took charge. The day of our court hearing crept closer with each minute, each tick of the clock a reminder that this fight was far from over. I mapped out the emotional battlefield ahead of me, grasping at knotted strands of evidence gathered through the chaos. I could not be a pawn in their game, not with everything I had endured. Panic was giving way to clarity. I was not just some hapless victim, I was a name with meaning, someone who demanded justice. Little did I realize that even as I sharpened my swords of truth, the real battle was still waiting in the shadows, far more vicious than I could have anticipated. With every plan I made, I felt the weight of my circumstances twisting and tightening around me, the walls closing in just as the date approached. A storm was brewing. A final confrontation loomed, and with each step, I felt more resolute as I prepared to pull the veil back on Karen and her unscrupulous accomplices. I steeled myself, for the courtroom was not merely a stage for my witness. It would become the heart of my revelations, a place where truth would expose them all. But just as I felt ready to unveil my findings, I stumbled upon something unexpected, an enticing twist that promised to change everything. Was the truth I sought really what I wanted, or would it lead to a realization that turned my world upside down? The stakes were rising, and I couldn't deny the trepidation fluttering in my gut. Something told me my greatest challenge was yet to come. As the date of our court hearing loomed over me like a storm cloud, I found myself pacing the floor of the bank, a mixture of dread and determination propelling me forward. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed above, casting a sterile glow on a scene that felt increasingly surreal. My heart thumped in rhythm with the ticking clock on the wall, reminding me that time was slipping through my fingers like the sand in the hourglass of this rigged mortgage disaster. I could still hear Karen's mocking laughter echoing in my mind, a twisted reminder of the betrayal lurking within every corner of this institution. Would I really manage to gather the strength to fight back, or would I falter just seconds before the bell? The moment I crossed paths with her again, my hands balled into fists, a fire igniting in my gut. There she was, draped in her tailored blazer, as if it were a suit of armor, strutting out of the bank like she owned the place, her arm looped through Mr. Thompson's, the architect of our financial ruin. She barely glanced my way, yet the condescending smirk tugging at her lips spoke volumes, and I felt the prick of fury mixed with disbelief. "You'll regret this, sweetheart," she called back over her shoulder, directing her venomous words at me, as if they were carried on the wind to seal my fate. As they sauntered away, I came face to face with my own inadequacy, grappling with the prospect that all my fighting might lead to nothing. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I clenched my jaw, locked in on my purpose with laser-like focus. I thought of our homey sanctuary, promised to my children sitting empty with every day that passed, slowly being consumed by despair and neglect. In that moment of anguish, the bank's sleek after-hours lobby morphed into a battleground, each piece of evidence I collected over the past few weeks weighing heavily on my mind. My last hope lay in an impending meeting with a local lawyer who specialized in foreclosure cases, the last flicker of light piercing through the suffocating gloom. That night, I hardly slept a wink. With every tick of the clock, my anxiety mounted. My laptop screen flickered like an uncertain flame as I prepared for my meeting. I could already hear the mechanical drone of the bank's voice in my head. "We have no record of your payment." I shuddered, recalling each call where I was met with indifference from someone on the other end of the linear life, reduced to a mere inconvenience. My heart ached with every critique hurled my way by impatient representatives whose dismissive tones threatened to extinguish my resolve. As I immersed myself in my research, I uncovered a deep well of emotions swelling within me. Fear morphed into righteousness, channeling the anguish of families torn apart by deeds like these into a powerful drive to stand firm against the very system that sought to crush us. I envisioned marching into that courtroom, armed with proof bank statements, emails, and who could forget the call log, documenting every fruitless attempt to rectify the situation. This wasn't just a mere formality. It felt personal, a chance to expose the craven dance between the bank and the schemer who had sold us our home. The night before my meeting with the lawyer, darkness wrapped around me like a heavy blanketeery creak of our dilapidated home echoing ominously. My phone buzzed with an unexpected notification. I barely took a moment to breathe before my eyes widened. The email was from the bank, an unexpected invoice claiming I owed not just the final payment, but an additional fee for processing errors. My breath caught in my throat as anger surged through me like a tempest. Were they doubling down on their deceit, knowing that this was more than a clerical error? My pulse quickened as I processed this new obstacle. Gathering the evidence felt increasingly crucial. It was a matter of survival now. I had to unravel the threads of this malevolent scheme woven between Karen and Mr. Thompson, exposing the sordid truth lurking behind the guise of respectability. These weren't just banking procedures. They were an indictment of everything wrong in a flawed system designed to ensnare the very people it claims to serve. Each pulse in my head reverberated with one truth. I could not afford to lose my home. The day of the court hearing arrived like an anxious beast, ready to consume me, but with a flicker of hope casting a shadow beneath its weight. I refused to back down. The air in the courtroom felt thick with anticipation as I laid my evidence on the table, the solemn figures surrounding me, observing with heavy eyes. With each piece of paperwork I presented, I could almost taste victory. I took a deep breath, ready to unveil the conspiracy that had cast me into this whirlwind of despair. Yet, as I unfolded my final piece of evidence, a recording of Karen exposing her conflict of interest in a conversation with Mr. Thompson, the room erupted with gasps. Their shock mirrored my own, and just as I dared to feel a sense of triumph, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. What further betrayal lay beneath the surface? I wondered anxiously if Karen would deliver one last surprise, leaving a deeper mark on our battle against the injustices we had faced. But in that heart-stopping moment, I felt a rush of determination igniting within me. This was my fight, and I would do whatever it took to reclaim my family's future. The night before my meeting sent my heart into overdrive, drowning me in dread. I lay restless in bed, shadows flickering across the walls like nightmares come to life. The click of a passing car echoed outside, slicing through the oppressive silence that blanketed my Florida home. Just as sleep threatened to claim me, my phone buzzed, jolting me awake like a dissonant alarm. I opened my email, my heart pounding in anticipation, only to be greeted by a digital bombshell. An invoice from the bank, boldly declaring not only that I owed the final payment, but a new, mysterious fee labeled processing errors. My breath hitched in my throat, anger bubbling within me as I realized that yet another roadblock had been thrown into my path. My head spun as I processed this new obstacle. The feeling of betrayal twisted my stomach like a vice, tightening with each moment. This was no mere mishap. I couldn't shake the growing certainty that someone was orchestrating this calamity. My gut churned as I pictured Karen and Mr. Thompson behind the scenes, their manipulative whispers buoying each other's treacherous schemes. What had started as a simple plea to save my home had spiraled into a labyrinth of injustice, where every path led back to the very people who had sold me the dream of homeownership. Gathering my documents felt ever more crucial. It was a matter of survival now. I tapped my foot nervously, filled with determination while my mind raced through every conversation I had had with the bank. I could almost envision the smirking faces of the financial predators, reveling in the chaos of the web they had spun. What ground was left to stand on when the institutions meant to protect us turned mercilessly against us? Desperation became clarity. I had to arm myself with every piece of evidence I could find. My fingers trembled on the keyboard as I zipped through my screenshots, call logs, and emails. There had to be a chink in the armor of their deceit. Just as I thought my resolve was steeling, a chilling doubt passed through my thoughts. Memories of every condescending word spoken by Karen haunted me, rattling around like echoes in a dark chamber. "You'll regret this, sweetheart." The words dripped from her tongue like poison, formulations, and legalese concealing dark intentions. I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was contending with a machine designed to break people like me, gears turning smoothly behind a glossy veneer, all fueled by greed and scheming. The clock ticked on each moment, draining me of precious energy. I envisioned the meeting with my lawyer, desperate to regain control, but fear wrestled against the growing flame of rebellion within me. It wasn't enough to simply fight. I needed a plan, a strategy that would expose their deception for what it truly was. I pored through every word, every figure, hoping to unearth an inconsistency, a mistake that could tip the scales. But every search hit a brick wall as I tossed and turned in frustration. Morning arrived too soon, and I sprung out of bed with anxiety gnawing at my core. As I dressed, my reflection stared back at me, one part weary and another ignited with the urge to fight back. I was more than just a victim. I was ready to unveil the treachery that had dragged me to the edge of ruin. As I slipped my documents into an organized folder, another thought haunted me. What if this fiasco was more than just bureaucratic error? Driving to the courthouse, questions twisted through my mind like a tornado was. There's something deliberately sinister about their actions. Had they exploited my financial struggles to profit off my misfortune? The answers eluded me, shadows whispering doubt into my psyche. Yet I knew one thing with certainty. I wouldn't let Karen's insidious game end with my downfall. The courtroom awaited me like a war zone full of unspoken fears and battles that could either lead to liberation or despair. Arriving at the courthouse, the towering walls felt like a reminder of everything at stake. When the gavel struck and I stood before the judge, I could hardly believe I was finally here. But just as I unfurled my final piece of evidence, a recorded conversation between Karen and Mr. Thompson, exposing their unethical dealings, an electrifying gasp rippled through the gallery. Before I could savor the shock in their eyes, an unexpected voice broke through, throwing my entire world into chaos. All eyes shifted, leaving me suspended between victory and fear. Suddenly, the ground beneath me felt less stable than it ever had. This was just the beginning, and it promised to plunge me deeper into a storm that might uncover even darker secrets. Would my battle to reclaim my home take an unexpected turn, revealing shadows neither of us could have predicted? On the day of the court hearing, the air was thick with tension as I slipped through the heavy courthouse doors. Morning light spilled into the cold, sterile space, illuminating the faces of anxious spectators. But I only had eyes for the judge presiding over my fate. My heart raced, each beat echoing louder than the last, while an insurmountable paper trail of evidence towered precariously beside me. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes, their silent hopes and fears mingling in the air like fog. With resolute determination, I stood and prepared to lay bare the sordid manipulation of the bank, my voice quivering yet fierce as I recounted Karen's illicit dealings. As I spoke, flashes of my journey flickered in my mind like a disorienting montage. Each sleepless night fighting against faceless bank representatives, every snide comment from Karen rang sharp, stinging as if struck anew. My recounting evolved from simple assertions to a battle cry. The room held a hushed reverence as I conveyed the details of the duplicitous email, the veiled threats that loomed over me. I felt the collective tension shift. Lawyers scribbled notes, eyebrows raised in disbelief, and even the judge's brow furrowed deeper as I unveiled the sordid tale of betrayal I had painstakingly pieced together. Just as I felt the tide turning, I reached into my bag, gripping the final piece of evidence like a lifeline. I took a deep breath and steadied my voice. And if there were any doubts about Karen's intentions, allow me to highlight this recorded conversation. Here she speaks openly about her conflicts of interest with Mr. Thompson. I pressed play, and the recorded exchange echoed through the courtroom. The ambiance shifted dramatically, and gasps rippled through the audience when they heard her calculating laughter intertwined with his condescending remarks. Time seemed to stand still as I watched their expressions transform from disbelief to realization. All those months of fear and uncertainty, wrapped in doubt, began to transform into a potent mixture of hope and vindication as my voice continued to reverberate against the cold marble walls. The conversations I had overheard were not just idle talk. They were scars of deception left in the wake of their greed. As the last recording faded, silence enveloped us, a quiet acknowledgement of truth laid bare. The judge's gaze settled heavily on Karen, her face flushed with indignation and shock. She seemed to shrink into herself as the collective realization of her wrongdoing washed over the room. I looked around at faces that mirrored my own victims of predatory practices, people who had once felt powerless against such a corrupt system. I could see something shift in the air, optimism sparking among my supporters scattered throughout the gallery. This was more than just my battle. It felt like a victory for all of us who stood by, weary of being trodden upon by systems designed to protect the guilty while punishing the innocent. The judge finally broke the silence, deliberating, her expression a careful mask of contemplation. I held my breath as gavel struck the hard surface with finality. This court finds sufficient evidence for a mistrial. Further investigations into the bank's practices and Miss Karen's conduct will be pursued. I believe we have reached a breaking point among the financial institutions, and it is time for accountability. This trial will reflect the pervasive reality of corruption. Applause erupted unexpectedly, echoing off the courtroom walls as the gavel fell. A wave of courage surged through me, washing away months of despair. Community members rallied behind me, resonating with my fight against the very money being used to prey on us. Karen, utterly speechless, slowly crumbled beneath the weight of her malice, her smirk evaporating like a mirage against the blazing truth. If only she could see herself now, stripped bare of her deceit. In the days that followed my courtroom victory, I received messages from neighbors who voiced support and admiration for my resolution to combat injustice. Legal battles loomed ahead, but I felt the strength of a community rallying behind me, bolstered by the hope that perhaps we could reclaim our lives. My fight was far from over, but as I stood amidst my newfound allies, I felt a sense of clarity rise within me, a promise to pursue justice not just for myself, but for anyone who felt lost in the clutches of institutional betrayal. My home in Florida, once fraught with anxiety, now felt like the cradle of resistance. We were not alone. Perhaps we could start a movement not just to safeguard our homes, but to dismantle systems that preyed upon the vulnerable, just as they had attempted to dismantle my life. I stepped forward into this new chapter, with resilience carved into my bones. The battle against corruption had just begun.